Those of us who have faced our own dark moments know that the path back to the light is never straight or easy. We understand what it means to stand outside looking in, to feel the weight of doors closing behind us, to wonder if anyone will ever see our worth again. If you have ever been dismissed, underestimated, or cast aside despite your competence, this story will remind you that vindication sometimes arrives in the most unexpected and dramatic ways possible. What happened to Dr. Sarah? Winters on a freezing December evening will challenge everything you think you know about how the world recognizes true expertise. The cold cut through Sarah's coat like knives as she stood on the concrete steps outside the Riverside Medical Complex, her hospital identification badge still warm in her trembling hand from where security had just removed it from her lanyard. 17 years. 17 years of night shifts and double coverage, of holding patients' hands through their darkest. Hours of making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. All of it reduced to this single moment, standing in the gathering darkness with December wind whipping her hair across her face, watching through the glass doors as her former colleagues moved through the brightly lit lobby without looking back. The cardboard box pressed against her ribs, corners digging in with each breath. Inside were the accumulated fragments of nearly 2 decades. A coffee mug her daughter had painted in 3rd grade, 3 framed certificates from continuing education courses, a small potted succulent that had somehow survived 14 years on her desk, a photograph of her team after they had saved a coding patient during the hospital's worst snowstorm. The plant's leaves brushed against her chin as she shifted the box higher, trying to find a position that did not make her arms ache quite so badly. Her feet were already going numb in her sneakers, the thin socks she had pulled on that morning never intended for standing outside in 28-degree weather. Behind those glass doors, warmth and light continued as if nothing had changed. The evening shift was arriving, nurses and technicians streaming past the security desk with their badges held ready, heading toward the elevators that would take them to their floors. Sarah had made that same walk thousands of times, knew every squeaky tile and flickering light fixture, could navigate the entire building, blindfolded. Now she stood on the wrong side of the threshold, officially barred from entering, her access revoked with the same casual efficiency that hospitals use to discharge patients who could no longer pay. The box shifted in her grip, and she had to clench her abs to keep from dropping it. The succulent tilted dangerously, its pot sliding against the smooth surface of the framed certificates. She caught it with her chin, pressing down to stabilize the load, and felt the plant's thick leaves cool against her skin. Her shoulders burned from holding the awkward weight, muscles trembling with the effort. She needed to move, to get to her car, to go home and figure out what came next. But her legs felt like lead, feet rooted to the concrete, as if her body refused to accept what her mind already knew. This chapter was over. Finished. Done. A gust of wind sent a plastic bag skittering across the parking lot, the sound sharp in the evening quiet. Sarah watched it tumble past, catching on a light post before tearing free and disappearing into the darkness beyond the parking lot's edge. The sky had that peculiar quality of winter twilight, not quite dark, but no longer light, the clouds heavy and low and threatening snow. Her breath came out in white puffs, dissipating quickly in the cold air. She could smell car exhaust from the nearby street, could hear the distant sound of traffic, the normal rhythms of a city preparing for night. Inside her coat pocket, her phone buzzed, then again, then a third time in rapid succession. Sarah did not need to check to know what those messages said. Her lawyer probably, confirming that the termination paperwork had been filed. Or maybe her daughter, texting to ask if she was coming home for dinner. Or possibly one of her former colleagues, someone brave enough to reach out despite the hospital's implicit warning that anyone who supported Sarah would face similar consequences. She let the phone buzz itself into silence, unable to free a hand to check without risking dropping everything she carried. The automatic doors slid open, and a young resident emerged, white coat bright under the entrance lights, stethoscope draped around his neck in that casual way that announced his status to the world. He glanced at Sarah as he passed, his gaze sliding over her and the cardboard box without recognition, without acknowledgement, without any sign that he understood he was looking at someone who had trained dozens of residents just like him. To him, she was just another person in the parking lot, unremarkable and unmemorable. Sarah felt that dismissal like a physical blow, a reminder that without the badge and the scrubs and the institutional backing, she was invisible. Her arms were shaking now, the box growing heavier with each passing second. She needed to move, had to move, but something kept her frozen there, some part of her brain still processing the enormity of what had just happened. 3 hours ago, she had been Dr. Sarah Winters, critical care specialist, the person administrators called when a case went sideways and needed expert intervention. Now she was just Sarah, unemployed and unemployable, her name about to be flagged in every healthcare database in the region, all because she had refused to stay quiet when she discovered what was happening in the hospital's medication distribution system. The memories played through her mind in rapid succession, each one sharp and clear. 6 weeks ago, noticing the discrepancies in the narcotic logs. 4 weeks ago, running her own quiet investigation, checking and rechecking the numbers because she could not believe what she was seeing. 3 weeks ago, taking her findings to her supervisor, laying out the evidence of systematic diversion, showing exactly how someone was manipulating the automated dispensing system to hide the theft of controlled substances. 2 weeks ago, watching that supervisor's face close down, seeing the calculation in his eyes as he decided that the problem was not the theft, but the person reporting it. Sarah had known in that moment that she was finished, had seen it in the way he carefully did not meet her eyes as he thanked her for bringing this to his attention, assured her it would be handled appropriately, suggested she not discuss this with anyone else while the matter was under investigation. She had known, but some foolish part of her had hoped she was wrong, had hoped that doing the right thing would matter, that patient safety would outweigh institutional convenience, that 17 years of exemplary service would count for something. Instead, they had spent the next 2 weeks building a case against her. Minor infractions suddenly became major violations. A medication error from 3 years ago, already addressed and resolved, was resurrected and reframed as evidence of incompetence. A personality conflict with a surgeon who disliked being questioned was transformed into proof of her inability to work collaboratively. Patient complaints that had never existed suddenly appeared in her file, complete with documentation she had never seen and could not challenge. They had constructed a narrative of progressive decline, painting her as someone who had once been competent, but had deteriorated to the point where termination was the only responsible option. The box tilted again, and this time Sarah let it. Let the weight shift. Let her arms drop. Let everything slide toward the ground. She caught it at the last second, bending her knees and lowering the box to the concrete steps with a control that was more instinct than intention. The succulent's pot cracked as it hit, a thin line appearing in the terracotta, but the plant itself remained intact. Sarah straightened slowly, feeling her spine crack and pop, and wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. Without the box to hold, she felt even more exposed. Her hands found her pockets, fingers curling into fists inside the fleece lining. The wind picked up again, stronger this time, and she turned her face away from its bite. Her eyes watered from the cold, tears forming at the corners and threatening to spill over. She blinked hard, refusing to cry, refusing to give them that satisfaction even though no one was watching. The parking lot stretched out before her, row after row of cars under the yellow glow of sodium lights. Her vehicle was somewhere in the far section, where employees without reserved spots were required to park. A 10-minute walk on a good day, longer in this weather with a box of belongings and legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. Sarah looked at the distance and felt exhaustion settle over her like a heavy blanket. Not just physical tiredness, though her body ached from the tension of the past 2 weeks, but a deeper weariness that came from fighting a battle she had known from the beginning she could not win. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she pulled it out, squinting at the screen in the dim light. Her daughter. "Mom, where are you? Dinner's ready." Simple words, normal words, the kind of text she received a dozen times a week, but tonight they felt like an anchor, a reminder that there was still a world beyond this parking lot, still people who valued her, still a life waiting even if it looked nothing like the one she had built. Sarah typed back with numb fingers, "On my way home. Be there soon." The words appeared on screen, Autocorrect fixing her typos, the message sending with a soft whoosh. She pocketed the phone and looked back at the hospital entrance. The lights inside seemed brighter now as full darkness settled over the parking lot, the building glowing like some kind of beacon or a warning. She could not decide which. A car pulled into the lot, headlights sweeping across the pavement, and Sarah watched it navigate toward the entrance. A visitor, probably, coming to see a patient during evening hours. The car stopped near the doors, and a woman got out, moving with the quick efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. She disappeared into the building without a backward glance, and Sarah felt a pang of something that might have been envy or might have been grief. To walk through those doors without hesitation, without the weight of termination and accusations and institutional betrayal. To belong somewhere. She had belonged once, had been part of something larger than herself, part of a team that saved lives and pushed back against death and made a difference in ways both large and small. She had been good at it too, better than good, exceptional. Her patient outcomes had consistently ranked in the top 5% nationally. Her complication rates were among the lowest in the hospital. She had trained 3 generations of nurses and residents, had served on committees and quality improvement initiatives, had published research and presented at conferences. None of that mattered now. None of it had protected her when the institution decided she was a liability. The cold was seeping through her coat, finding its way past the insulation and the layers beneath, settling into her bones. Sarah bent and picked up the box again, grunting with the effort. The cracked pot shifted and she adjusted her grip to keep it steady. Her arms protested immediately, muscles screaming after the brief respite, but she ignored them, one foot in front of the other. That was all she had to do. Walk to the car, drive home, figure out the rest later. The first step was the hardest. Her legs did not want to cooperate, did not want to accept that this was really happening, but she forced them to move, forced herself forward, and once she started, it became easier. Not easy, but easier. Her sneakers made soft sounds on the concrete, then transitioned to the rougher texture of the parking lot asphalt. The box bounced slightly with each step, the contents shifting and settling. She focused on keeping her grip firm, on maintaining her balance, on not thinking about what she was leaving behind. The parking lot seemed to stretch longer than she remembered, each row of cars an obstacle to navigate around. Her breath came harder now, white clouds forming and dissolving in rapid succession. Sweat prickled under her arms despite the cold, her body working to maintain the awkward load. The muscles in her forearms were burning, a deep ache that promised worse pain tomorrow. She would have bruises where the box's corners pressed against her ribs, purple marks that would last for days and remind her every time she moved. Halfway across the lot, Sarah had to stop, had to set the box down on the hood of someone's sedan and shake out her arms, trying to restore circulation to her hands. Her fingers were stiff, the joints reluctant to straighten. She flexed them repeatedly, watching the headlights from passing cars on the nearby street, letting herself rest for just a moment. The cold was worse now that she was not moving, the wind finding every gap in her clothing. She could feel it against her neck, could feel it working its way up her sleeves, could feel it stealing what little warmth her body was generating. A helicopter passed overhead, the sound sudden and loud in the quiet evening. Sarah looked up instinctively, tracking its lights across the dark sky. Medical transport probably, heading to or from one of the trauma centers downtown. She had called. For dozens of those flights during her career, had coordinated with flight nurses and paramedics, had helped load critically ill patients into the small cabins where every second counted. The helicopter disappeared beyond the hospital roof, and the sound faded, leaving behind a silence that felt even deeper than before. Sarah picked up the box again and resumed walking. Her car was visible now, a dark shape in the far corner of the lot, where the lights did not quite reach. She had parked there, this morning full of determination, ready to face whatever the day brought, still hoping that somehow everything would work out. That morning felt like a lifetime ago. The person who had parked that car no longer existed. In her place was this diminished version, this woman carrying a box of office supplies and trying not to fall apart in a parking lot. The car's locks clicked open when she was still 10 feet away, the sound sharp and welcoming. Sarah reached the driver's door and had to set the box on the roof to free her hands, fingers fumbling with the handle. The interior light came on when she opened the door, warm and yellow, and she felt a rush of gratitude for this small enclosed space that belonged to her. She maneuvered the box into the passenger seat, buckling it in with the seatbelt in a gesture that was probably ridiculous, but made her feel better. The succulent's leaves pressed against the dashboard, the cracked pot visible in the dim light. Sarah slid behind the wheel and pulled the door shut, sealing herself into the quiet. The cold interior immediately began absorbing her body heat, the steering wheel icy under her hands. She sat for a moment without starting the engine, letting the silence settle around her. Her reflection stared back from the rearview mirror, eyes shadowed and face pale in the overhead light. She looked older than she had this morning, lines deeper around her mouth, exhaustion evident in every feature. She looked like someone who had been through something terrible and survived, but only just. Her hands were shaking as she put the key in the ignition, not from the cold anymore, but from the delayed reactions setting in now that she was alone and safe. The adrenaline that had carried her through the termination meeting and the long walk across the parking lot was draining away, leaving behind a trembling weakness that made her movements clumsy. She had to try twice to turn the key, her fingers slipping on the metal. The engine caught on the second attempt, rumbling to life with a sound that was familiar and comforting. Sarah sat with her hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield at the hospital building. From this distance it looked almost beautiful. All those lit windows and the clean lines of modern architecture. You could not see from here the politics and the compromises, the way institutions protected themselves at the expense of individuals, the casual cruelty that happened behind closed doors. From here it just looked like a place where people went to get better, where skilled professionals worked to heal and help. The illusion was almost perfect. The heater began pushing out lukewarm air, not warm yet, but promising warmth to come. Sarah adjusted the vents, directing the flow toward her feet and hands. Feeling was returning to her fingers, bringing with it a pins and needles sensation that was almost painful. She flexed them on the steering wheel, watching the tendons move under her skin, reminding herself that she was still here, still whole, still capable even if the hospital no longer wanted her capabilities. Her phone buzzed again. Her daughter, probably wondering why she was taking so long. Sarah picked it up and saw not just one message but a dozen notifications she had been ignoring while standing outside in the cold. Most were from her daughter, increasingly worried texts asking if she was okay. But there were others too. Her lawyer, confirming he had received the termination documents and would review them tonight. A colleague from another hospital, someone she had mentored years ago, saying she had heard what happened and was so sorry. Another colleague, this one still at Riverside, warning her that administration was already spinning the narrative, telling people that Sarah had been terminated for cause after multiple warnings. Sarah set the phone face down on the center console, unable to deal with any of it right now. The messages would still be there later. The problems would still be there later. Everything would still be there later. Right now she just needed to drive home, to get through the next hour, to make it to tomorrow. That was all she could handle, 1 hour at a time. She put the car in reverse and backed out of the parking space, turning toward the exit. The route out of the lot took her past the main entrance one more time, past those bright lights and glass doors. Sarah did not look, kept her eyes forward, focused on the road ahead, on the turn signal and the brake lights of the car in front of her. She did not look back, because she was afraid if she did she would see everything she was losing, would feel the full weight of it, and she could not afford to break down now. Not yet. Not here. The traffic on the main road was light for this time of evening, most of the rush hour commuters already home. Sarah merged into the flow and let the familiar movements of driving take over, hands and feet operating on autopilot while her mind went somewhere else. She had made this drive thousands of times, knew every light and turn and landmark. Tonight it felt different though. Tonight she was not driving home from work, but away from it, leaving behind not just a building, but an entire identity. The radio was off, and she did not turn it on, preferring the silence broken only by the sound of the engine and the occasional whoosh of passing cars. The heater was working better now, warm air filling the cabin, and Sarah could feel her body slowly thawing. Her fingers had stopped aching, Her toes were regaining sensation. The shivers that had been running through her were gradually subsiding. Physical comfort, at least, was returning even if everything else remained broken. At a red light, Sarah looked at the other drivers around her. A man in a truck, talking on his phone. A woman in an SUV, singing along to music Sarah could not hear. A teenager in a beat-up sedan, drumming on the steering wheel. All of them going about their normal evenings, unaware that the person stopped next to them had just had her entire world dismantled. The light changed, and they all moved forward, each heading to their own destinations, their own lives continuing uninterrupted. Sarah's neighborhood appeared sooner than she expected. The familiar streets and houses a reminder that some things remained constant. Her daughter's car was in the driveway, the living room lights on, a small sign that someone was waiting for her. Sarah pulled in next to the other car and sat for a moment, gathering herself. She would have to go inside and explain what happened, would have to see the worry and anger in her daughter's eyes, would have to figure out how to tell her that everything was going to be okay when Sarah did not believe it herself. The box sat buckled in the passenger seat, the cracked pot and wilting plant visible in the glow from the porch light. Sarah looked at it and felt a wave of exhaustion so profound it made her dizzy. She did not want to carry that box inside, did not want to unpack it and find places for all those remnants of her former life, did not want to face the reality that this was now her present, not some temporary setback, but her actual situation. But she could not sit in the car forever, could not hide from what came next. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door, the cold air rushing in to replace the warmth she had finally achieved. She walked around to the passenger side and retrieved the box, lifting it with arms that protested the renewed burden. The front door was unlocked, and she pushed through it, calling out to her daughter that she was home. What Sarah did not know, could not have known as she set that box down on her kitchen table and accepted her daughter's hug and tried to explain through tears what had happened, was that 1,700 miles away, in a secure facility beneath the Pentagon, a crisis was unfolding that would change everything. Could not have known that in less than 48 hours, her phone would ring with a number she did not recognize, that the voice on the other end would ask if she was Dr. Sarah Winters, the critical care specialist who had worked at Riverside Medical Complex. Could not have known that she was about to discover that sometimes the people who matter most are not the ones who fired you, but the ones who have been watching all along. But that was still to come. That was tomorrow's Kaol story, next week's vindication, next month's headlines. Tonight, Sarah Winters was just a woman who had lost her job, standing in her kitchen and trying to figure out how to survive what came next, completely unaware that her expertise was about to become the most valuable asset in the entire United States military medical system. The succulent sat on the counter where she had placed it, the crack in its pot a visible reminder of the day's damage. Sarah looked at it and thought about how some things break and cannot be fixed, while others break and grow back stronger. She did not know yet which category she fell into, did not know that the answer would arrive with the sound of rotor blades and the sight of Navy helicopters circling her house, demanding the expert they could not afford to be without. Tonight, she just knew she was tired and cold, and that tomorrow she would have to start figuring out how to rebuild a life from the pieces scattered around her. She made tea because that was what you did when you did not know what else to do. Filled the kettle, set it on the stove, pulled down her favorite mug from the cabinet. Normal actions, familiar motions, the kind of routine that helped when everything else was chaos. Her daughter sat at the table asking questions Sarah only half answered, offering support that Sarah accepted numbly. The kettle whistled and Sarah poured water over a tea bag, watching the color bloom and spread through the clear liquid. That night, Sarah Winters slept fitfully, her dreams full of locked doors and cardboard boxes, and the sound of helicopter blades cutting through winter air. She did not know why she kept dreaming of helicopters, did not know that her subconscious was already preparing her for what was coming, did not know that in less than 2 days, that sound would become the most important thing she had ever heard. But the morning would come soon enough, and with it, the phone call that would change everything. For now, Sarah slept, and the succulent sat on her counter with its cracked pot. And somewhere far away, Military personnel were frantically searching databases for a doctor with a very specific set of skills. A doctor who had just become available in the most unexpected way possible. The story of Sarah Winters was not over. It was only just beginning. 3 days had passed since Sarah's termination. 3 days of sending out resumes and making phone calls and discovering that her name had indeed been flagged in every healthcare database she tried to access. 3 days of watching her savings account and calculating how long she could last before she had to sell the house. 3 days of her daughter trying to be supportive while clearly worried about their future. 3 days that felt like 3 years. Sarah was in her home office, staring at yet another rejection email, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost did not answer, assuming it was another recruiter calling to tell her that, unfortunately, they could not consider her application given the circumstances of her departure from Riverside. But something made her pick up. Maybe desperation, maybe hope, maybe just the need to hear another human voice. Dr. Winters? The voice was male, professional, with an edge of urgency that immediately caught her attention. Yes, this is Sarah Winters. She did not correct the title, even though she no longer felt entitled to it. Dr. Winters, my name is Commander James Mitchell, United States Navy. I need to speak with you about a matter of national security. Is this a secure line? Sarah sat up straighter, her mind racing. National security? The Navy? Yes, I suppose so. I mean, it is my personal cell phone. What is this about? Dr. Winters, I need to confirm some information first. You are the critical care specialist who worked at Riverside Medical Complex until 3 days ago, correct? Specializing in infectious disease protocols and crisis response? Yes, that's correct. Sarah's heart was pounding now. How did the Navy know about her termination? Why did they care about her specializations? And you are the author of the paper published in the Journal of Critical Care Medicine 2 years ago regarding novel containment protocols for unknown pathogens in civilian hospital settings. Sarah remembered that paper, had spent 6 months researching and writing it, drawing on her experience with several unusual cases that had come through Riverside's emergency department. It had been well received in academic circles, but largely ignored by hospital administrators, who found her recommendations too expensive to implement. Yes, I wrote that paper. Commander Mitchell, what is this about? Dr. Winters, we have a situation. I cannot discuss details over the phone, but I need you to understand that this is urgent. Life or death urgent. We need your expertise, and we need it now. My expertise. Sarah heard the bitterness in her own voice. Commander, I was just fired from my job. My former employer has made sure that no hospital in the region will hire me. I am not sure what kind of expertise you think I have that would be valuable to the Navy. Dr. Winters, I am aware of your employment situation. I am also aware of why you were terminated. There was a pause, and when Commander Mitchell spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made Sarah sit even straighter. I am aware that you reported systematic narcotic diversion and were punished for it. I am aware that you were right and that your former employer chose to protect themselves rather than address the problem. And I am aware that despite all of that, your clinical record is impeccable and your expertise in infectious disease containment is exactly what we need right now. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. Someone believed her. Someone knew the truth. What do you need from me? I need you to be ready to travel in approximately 6 hours. A car will pick you up at your home. You will be brought to a secure facility where you will be briefed on the situation. I cannot tell you more than that right now, but Dr. Winters, I need you to trust me when I say that what we are facing requires someone with your specific knowledge and experience. Will you help us? 6 hours. A secure facility. National security. It sounded like something from a movie, not real life. But the urgency in Commander Mitchell's voice was real, and the validation of her expertise after 3 days of rejection was almost overwhelming. Yes, Sarah heard herself say. Yes, I will help. Thank you, Dr. Winters. The car will arrive at 1400 hours. Bring identification and any medical certifications you have. Do not bring personal electronics. Everything you need will be provided. And Dr. Winters, what you are about to see and hear is classified. You will be required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Do you understand? I understand. Good. We will see you soon. And Dr. Winters, thank you. You have no idea how important this is." The call ended, and Sarah sat staring at her phone, trying to process what had just happened. The Navy needed her expertise, needed her enough to track her down 3 days after her termination and ask her to help with something classified and urgent. Part of her wondered if this was some kind of elaborate scam, but the professional tone and the specific details Commander Mitchell had mentioned suggested otherwise. Sarah looked at the clock. 6 hours. She needed to prepare, needed to figure out what to tell her daughter, needed to find her medical certifications and make sure her identification was current, needed to try to understand what she was walking into. But underneath all the practical concerns was something else, something she had not felt since the moment security had escorted her out of Riverside Medical Complex. Purpose. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, what she knew and what she could do still mattered. She stood and walked to her bedroom, pulling out the small overnight bag she used for conferences. If they were asking her to travel, she should probably pack something even if they said not to bring personal electronics. Clean clothes, toiletries, her reading glasses. She moved through the motions automatically, her mind elsewhere. What kind of situation required her specific expertise? What was happening that the Navy could not handle with their own? Medical personnel? Her daughter appeared in the doorway. "Mom? I heard you on the phone. Is everything okay?" Sarah turned to face her, trying to figure out how to explain something she did not fully understand herself. "I just got a call from the Navy. They need me to consult on something. I have to leave in a few hours." "The Navy? Mom, what are you talking about?" "I do not have all the details yet. They said it was classified, but they specifically asked for me, for my expertise. I know it. Sounds strange, but I think this is real." Her daughter looked skeptical but also hopeful. "Does this mean, is this a job?" "I do not know. Maybe, or maybe just a consultation. But they knew about my work, knew about my research. Someone out there thinks I have something valuable to offer." Sarah felt her voice crack slightly. "Someone thinks I am worth something." Her daughter crossed the room and hugged her. "Mom, you have always been worth something. That hospital was stupid to let you go. If the Navy is smart enough to recognize your expertise, then good for them." Sarah held her daughter tight, drawing strength from the embrace. "I have to go. I do not know how long I will be gone or when I will be able to call, but I will contact you as soon as I can, okay?" "Okay. Be careful, Mom." "I will." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Sarah gathered her certifications, made sure her passport was current just in case, packed and repacked her overnight bag 3 times. She tried to eat lunch but could not manage more than a few bites, her stomach too knotted with anticipation. She kept checking the clock, watching the minutes tick down toward 1400 hours. At precisely 2 in the afternoon, a black SUV pulled into her driveway. Sarah watched from the window as 2 men in dark suits emerged, their bearing and movements screaming military even in civilian clothes. One of them approached the front door while the other stayed by the vehicle, scanning the street with the kind of awareness that suggested training and experience. Sarah opened the door before he could knock. "I am Dr. Winters." "Ma'am." He showed her identification that confirmed he was indeed military personnel. "I am here to escort you to the briefing facility. Are you ready to go?" "Yes." Sarah grabbed her bag and followed him to the SUV, her daughter watching from the doorway with a mixture of concern and pride. Sarah waved once, then slid into the back seat of the vehicle. The interior smelled of leather and something else, something clinical and official. The windows were tinted dark enough that she could barely see out. The drive took nearly 2 hours, heading east out of the city and into increasingly rural areas. Sarah tried to track their route but eventually gave up, the turns and highways blurring together. Her escort said nothing, responding to her attempts at conversation with polite but minimal answers. She got the message and settled into silence, watching the landscape change outside the tinted windows. Finally, they turned onto an unmarked road that led to what looked like an abandoned industrial complex. But as they approached, Sarah could see that the abandonment was carefully maintained camouflage. There were guards, though they were not obviously visible. There were cameras, disguised as normal security equipment. There were barriers that looked like they had been there for years, but were clearly functional and well maintained. The SUV stopped at a gate that slid open to admit them. then closed immediately behind. They drove through what appeared to be a loading area and into an underground garage. The transition from daylight to artificial light was jarring, and Sarah blinked as her eyes adjusted. The garage was clean and modern, nothing like the decrepit exterior of the building above. This was an active facility, and a well-funded one. Dr. Winters, if you will come with me. Her escort opened her door and gestured toward an elevator. Sarah followed, her overnight bag feeling suddenly inadequate for whatever she was walking into. The elevator descended for what felt like several floors, her ears popping from the pressure change. When the doors opened, she found herself in a corridor that could have been part of any modern office building, except for the armed guards stationed at regular intervals. They stopped at a conference room where Commander Mitchell was waiting. He was younger than she had expected from his voice, maybe early 40s, with the kind of fitness that came from military discipline and the kind of exhaustion that came from too many sleepless nights. He stood when she entered, extending his hand. Dr. Winters, thank you for coming. I know this is all very irregular. Commander Mitchell. Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the calluses that suggested he was not just a desk officer. I am here. Now can you tell me what this is about? Please sit. He gestured to the conference table, and Sarah took a seat. Commander Mitchell sat across from her, and for the first time she noticed the other people in the room. A woman in Navy uniform with medical insignia. 2 men in suits who had intelligence written all over them. A civilian in a lab coat who looked like he had not slept in days. Commander Mitchell opened a folder and slid several documents across the table. First, I need you to sign these. They are non-disclosure agreements. What you are about to hear cannot be shared with anyone outside this facility, including your family. The penalties for violation are severe. Do you understand? Sarah read through the documents quickly, her legal training from years of hospital work helping her parse the dense language. It was serious, no question, but she had come this far. I understand. She signed each document and slid them back across the table. Good. Dr. Winters, 8 days ago, a Navy SEAL team conducted a raid on a suspected bioweapons facility in Southeast Asia. During that raid, 3 of our personnel were exposed to an unknown pathogen. They were immediately quarantined and transported to our secure medical facility. Since then, 2 more personnel who had contact with the original 3 have also developed symptoms. Sarah felt her blood run cold. What kind of symptoms? The woman in medical uniform spoke up. Initial presentation was flu-like. Fever, muscle aches, respiratory distress. But the progression has been unlike anything we have seen before. The pathogen appears to be highly contagious, with an incubation period of approximately 72 hours. Once symptoms develop, patients deteriorate rapidly. We have lost 1 of the original 3. The other 2 are critical. The 2 secondary cases are early stage but declining. What treatments have you tried? Everything we have. Broad-spectrum antivirals, antibiotics in case of secondary infection, supportive care. Nothing is working. The pathogen is resistant to everything we throw at it. The exhaustion in her voice was palpable. Commander Mitchell leaned forward. Dr. Winters, we chose this facility for initial containment because it is isolated and secure, but we are running out of time. If this pathogen gets out, if it spreads beyond our containment protocols, we could be looking at a pandemic that makes COVID look like a minor inconvenience. We need someone who understands how to contain unknown pathogens in a crisis situation. Someone who can think outside the box and implement protocols that might not be in any textbook. Your paper outlined exactly the kind of creative containment strategies we need. Sarah's mind was racing. An unknown pathogen, highly contagious, resistant to treatment. This was every infectious disease specialist's nightmare scenario. Why me? You must have dozens of experts with more experience, more resources. The civilian in the lab coat spoke for the first time. We do. And they are all thinking in conventional terms, suggesting protocols that might work for known pathogens, but are not addressing the unique characteristics of what we are dealing with. Your paper suggested containment strategies that are unconventional, but they might be exactly what we need. I need to see the patients. I need to see your current containment setup. I need access to all the data you have on this pathogen. Sarah was already shifting into professional mode. The fear and uncertainty giving way to the clinical thinking that had defined her career. "You will have full access to everything," Commander Mitchell said. "But first, we need to be clear about something. This facility is our last line of defense. If we cannot contain this here, if we cannot figure out how to treat it, we will have to make some very hard decisions about how to prevent it from spreading to the general population. Do you understand what I am saying?" Sarah understood. He was talking about extreme measures, about sacrificing the people in this facility to protect everyone else, about making the kind of decisions that kept military commanders awake at night. "I understand, but let us focus on making sure it does not come to that." "Agreed. Dr. Winters, welcome to Facility 7. Let us get you suited up and into the hot zone." The next several hours were a crash course in military containment protocols and the specific challenges of Facility 7. Sarah was fitted with a positive pressure suit, trained on the decontamination procedures, and briefed on the layout of the medical wing where the infected personnel were being treated. Every step was careful, methodical, designed to minimize risk while maximizing her ability to assess the situation. Finally, she stood in the airlock leading to the isolation ward, her suit pressurized and her breathing loud in her own ears. Through the reinforced glass, she could see the two critical patients, their bodies ravaged by whatever pathogen they had been exposed to. Machines beeped and hissed around them, keeping them alive through sheer technological force. Medical staff moved carefully between the beds, their own suits making them look like astronauts rather than doctors and nurses. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped through the airlock. The first thing that hit her was the smell, even through the suit's filtration system. Sickness and disinfectant and something else, something organic and wrong. She approached the first patient, a young man who could not have been more than 25, and began her assessment. What she found was both fascinating and terrifying. The pathogen was attacking multiple systems simultaneously, overwhelming the body's defenses in a way that suggested sophisticated engineering rather than natural evolution. This was not just a disease. This was a weapon, designed to be as lethal and contagious as possible. But Sarah had spent 17 years dealing with the unexpected, with the cases that did not fit the textbooks, with the crises that required creative thinking and rapid adaptation. She stood in that isolation ward and began to see patterns, began to understand what they were dealing with, began to formulate a plan that might just work. It would require resources they did not have. It would require taking risks that no civilian hospital would ever approve. It would require convincing military brass to trust her judgment, despite her recent termination and lack of military experience. But as Sarah looked at those dying patients and thought about what would happen if this pathogen escaped containment, she knew she had no choice. She had been given a second chance, an opportunity to prove that her expertise mattered, that doing the right thing was worth the cost. She was not going to waste it. Sarah Winters had been locked out and left standing in the cold, but now she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she had been trained to do. And she was going to save every single person in this facility, or die trying. The real work was about to begin. Sarah spent the next 6 hours in the isolation ward, examining patients, reviewing every piece of data the military medical team had collected, and formulating her hypothesis about what they were dealing with. When she finally emerged from the hot zone and went through the extensive decontamination process, she was exhausted but focused. She had seen enough to confirm her initial suspicions, and now she needed to convince the people in charge that her unconventional approach was their best chance. Commander Mitchell was waiting for her outside the decontamination chamber, along with the facility's chief medical officer, Captain Rebecca Torres, and a 2-star general who had apparently arrived while Sarah was in the ward. The general's name tag read Harrison, and his expression suggested he was not thrilled about taking medical advice from a civilian who had been fired 3 days ago. "Dr. Winters," Commander Mitchell said, "what did you find?" Sarah pulled off her hood, feeling her sweat-soaked hair stick to her scalp. This is not a natural pathogen. The way it attacks multiple systems simultaneously, the resistance to conventional treatments, the precise incubation period. Someone engineered this, and they engineered it specifically to be difficult to contain and treat. General Harrison crossed his arms. "We suspected as much. What we need to know is whether you can stop it. I think I can, but not with conventional protocols. Sarah pulled out the tablet she had been given and brought up her notes. Every treatment you have tried has focused on attacking the pathogen directly. Antivirals, antibiotics, immune modulators. But this thing was designed to resist those approaches. What we need to do is change the environment it is operating in. Captain Torres frowned. Change the environment? What do you mean? Your paper, the civilian scientist from earlier said, stepping forward. You proposed using environmental manipulation as a containment strategy. Temperature, humidity, oxygen levels. Exactly. Sarah pulled up her original research. I studied several cases where pathogens showed unexpected sensitivity to environmental factors that had nothing to do with traditional medical interventions. If we can figure out what environmental conditions this pathogen is vulnerable to, we can create a treatment space that weakens it enough for the patient's own immune systems to fight back. General Harrison looked skeptical. That sounds like a long shot, Doctor. It is, Sarah admitted. But every conventional approach has failed. We are running out of time and running out of options. My approach might not work, but what you are doing now definitely is not working. There was a long silence. Sarah could feel them weighing her proposal, weighing her credibility, weighing the risks of trying something unprecedented against the risks of continuing to fail with conventional methods. She forced herself to stay quiet, to let them process, even though every second of delay meant more deterioration for the patients upstairs. Commander Mitchell spoke first. What do you need? Access to the lab, time to run tests on samples from the patients, and authority to modify the environmental controls in the isolation ward. Sarah looked directly at General Harrison. I know this is unorthodox. I know my credentials are questionable right now, but I am the best chance those people upstairs have, and I think you know it, or you would not have brought me here. General Harrison stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You have 24 hours, Dr. Winters. Show me something that works, and I will give you whatever resources you need. Fail, and we implement Containment Protocol Omega. Sarah did not ask what Containment Protocol Omega was. She did not need to. The grim set of the A. General's jaw told her everything she needed to know. Understood. I will need the lab set up immediately. Dr. Chen will assist you, Captain Torres said, gesturing to the civilian scientist. He is our lead researcher here. Whatever you need, he can provide. The next 18 hours were a blur of experimentation and analysis. Sarah and Dr. Chen worked side by side, testing the pathogen's response to various environmental conditions. They tried temperature variations, humidity changes, alterations in oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, even manipulated lighting and electromagnetic fields. Most of the tests showed no effect, but then, at hour 14, they found something. Look at this, Dr. Chen said, pointing to the microscope display. When we dropped the temperature to 55 degrees and increased humidity to 85%, the pathogen's replication rate decreased by 40%. Sarah leaned in, studying the data. It was not enough to kill the pathogen, but it was enough to slow it down significantly. What if we combined that with hyperoxic conditions? Increased oxygen levels might give the patient's immune systems the boost they need while the pathogen is weakened. They ran the test. The results were even better than Sarah had hoped. Under the specific environmental conditions they had identified, the pathogen's replication rate dropped by 60%, and markers of immune system activity increased by 30%. It was not a cure, but it was a fighting chance. We need to implement this immediately, Sarah said, checking the time. They had 6 hours left before General Harrison's deadline. How fast can we modify the isolation ward environmental controls? 2 hours, maybe 3, Dr. Chen said. But Dr. Winters, there is a risk. If we are wrong about this, if the environmental changes cause unexpected complications, we could make things worse. I know, but we are out of other options. Sarah pulled out her phone to call Commander Mitchell, then remembered she had been told not to bring personal electronics. I need to brief the command team. Can you start prepping the modifications? On it. Sarah found Commander Mitchell in the command center, surrounded by monitors showing various parts of the facility. He looked up when she entered, and she could see the hope and fear warring in his expression. We found something, Sarah said without preamble. It is not a cure, but it might give the patients a chance. I need authorization to modify the isolation ward environmental controls. Show me. Sarah spent the next 20 minutes walking him through their findings, explaining the science in terms a non-medical officer could understand. To his credit, Commander Mitchell asked intelligent questions and grasped the implications quickly. "How confident are you in this approach?" he asked finally. 60%, Sarah said honestly. "Maybe 70, but that is better odds than we had an hour." "Ego." Commander Mitchell studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Do it. I will brief General Harrison. You have full authorization to implement your protocol." The next 3 hours were controlled chaos. Engineering teams modified the environmental controls in the isolation ward, while Sarah and Captain Torres prepared the medical staff for the changes. They had to be careful, had to make sure the modifications would not harm the patients even as they targeted the pathogen. Every calculation had to be precise, every adjustment carefully calibrated. Finally, they were ready. Sarah stood in the observation room overlooking the isolation ward, watching as the environmental conditions began to change. The temperature dropped slowly, carefully controlled to avoid shocking the patient's systems. Humidity increased, creating a thick, cool atmosphere that made everything look slightly hazy. Oxygen levels rose, flooding the ward with air that would help the patients breathe even as it potentially harmed the pathogen. The medical monitors showed immediate changes. Heart rate stabilized. Oxygen saturation improved. The patients were not getting worse, which after days of steady decline was itself a victory. But the real test would come in the next few hours, as they waited to see if the pathogen's replication rate decreased enough to let the patient's immune systems mount an effective defense. Sarah stayed in the observation room, refusing to leave even when Commander Mitchell suggested she get some rest. She had to see this through, had to know if her unconventional approach would work. Captain Torres brought her coffee and a sandwich, which Sarah consumed without tasting, her eyes never leaving the monitors. Hour 1, stable. Hour 2, slight improvement in respiratory function. Hour 3, white blood cell counts beginning to rise, suggesting immune system activation. Hour 4, pathogen levels in blood samples showing measurable decrease. It was working. By hour 6, 2 of the 4 patients were showing significant improvement. By hour 8, all 4 were stable and improving. By hour 12, they were able to reduce the level of mechanical ventilation for the least affected patient. It was not a cure, not yet, but it was progress. Real, measurable progress. General Harrison arrived at hour 14, his expression still skeptical but less hostile than before. He studied the monitors in silence, then turned to Sarah. "Explain to me what I am seeing." "Dr. Winters." Sarah walked him through the data, showing him how the environmental modifications had weakened the pathogen enough for the patient's own immune systems to begin fighting back. "We are not out of the woods yet," she cautioned. "We will need to maintain these conditions for at least another week, possibly longer, and we will need to develop a more permanent treatment protocol. But the immediate crisis is contained. And the risk of spread? Minimal, as long as we maintain current containment protocols and keep the patients in the modified environment. The pathogen is significantly less viable under these conditions, which means less shedding and lower transmission risk." General Harrison nodded slowly. "Good work, Doctor. Commander Mitchell tells me this approach came from research you published 2 years ago." "Yes, sir. Research that your former employer apparently did not value enough to implement." There was an edge to his voice that suggested he knew more about her situation than she had realized. "Their loss, our gain." He turned to Commander Mitchell. "I want Dr. Winters on permanent contract as a civilian consultant, whatever it takes. Set up a secure communication line so she can continue to advise on this case remotely and start working on getting her clearance upgraded. We are going to need her expertise going forward." Sarah felt something unlock in her chest, a tension she had been carrying for so long she had almost forgotten it was. "There. Thank you, General." "Do not thank me, Doctor. You earned this. Now I suggest you get some sleep. You look like hell." Sarah laughed, surprised by the sound. "Yes, sir." She left the observation room and found a quiet corner where she could finally check her phone. Dozens of messages from her daughter, increasingly worried as the hours passed with no contact. Sarah sent a quick text. "Safe. Cannot explain yet. Home soon. I love you." Then she found an empty office and collapsed onto a sofa, asleep, before she could fully process everything that had happened. When she woke 8 hours later, stiff and disoriented, the first thing she did was check on the patients. All 4 were continuing to improve. The crisis was not over, but it was contained. They had bought time to develop a more comprehensive treatment, time to study the pathogen and understand it better, time to prepare for the possibility of future exposures. Sarah Winters had been brought to Facility 7 as a last resort, a desperate gamble by people who had run out of conventional options. She had been locked out of her career, dismissed by an institution that valued politics over patient care, left standing in the cold with nowhere to go. But here, in this secret facility with its dying patients and desperate need, she had found something she thought she had lost forever. She had found her purpose. She had found people who valued her expertise and trusted her judgment. She had found proof that doing the right thing, even when it cost everything, was still worth it. But more than that, she had found something else. She had found that the people who really mattered were not the ones who had fired her, but the ones who had been watching all along. The ones who saw past the politics and the institutional self-protection to recognize real competence and real courage. And now, as Sarah stood in that observation room watching her patients improve and feeling the weight of exhaustion and triumph in equal measure, she realized something else. Sometimes the worst moment of your life is not an ending. Sometimes it is just the universe clearing the path for something better, something more important, something you could never have found if you had stayed in your comfortable position at a hospital that did not deserve you. Sarah Winters had been locked out, but she had not been forgotten. And now, as she prepared to return home with a military contract and a new purpose, she understood that, some doors close so that others can open. Some endings are really beginnings. Some failures are really the first step toward success. She had been standing in the cold, but the helicopters were coming. She just had not known it yet. The story of what happened at Facility 7 remained classified for obvious reasons. Sarah signed more non-disclosure agreements than she could count, agreed to security protocols that would govern her life for years to come, and accepted a civilian consultant position that would fundamentally change her career trajectory. But the immediate crisis was contained. The patients were recovering, and Sarah had proven beyond any doubt that her expertise was valuable and her judgment was sound. 3 weeks after her first visit to Facility 7, Sarah found herself back at her home, trying to readjust to normal life while processing everything that had happened. Her daughter was thrilled about the new contract, relieved that the financial pressure had eased, proud that her mother's expertise had been recognized at the highest levels. But Sarah herself was still processing, still trying to understand how her life had changed so dramatically in such a short time. Then, on a cold Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month after her termination from Riverside Medical Complex, Sarah received a phone call that would bring everything full circle. "Dr. Winters, this is Admiral Patricia Chen, United States Navy Medical Corps." The voice was crisp, professional, and carried an authority that made Sarah sit straighter. "I am calling to inform you that your work at Facility 7 has come to the attention of the Secretary of... He would like to meet with you personally to discuss expanding your role." Sarah, "The Secretary of Defense?" "Yes, ma'am. Additionally, I have been authorized to inform you that an investigation has been opened to the circumstance of your termination from Riverside Medical Complex. The systematic narcotic diversion unit has been confirmed, and federal charges are pending against several individuals in hospital administration. Your name has been cleared in all healthcare databases, and Riverside is facing significant legal consequence for their retaliation." Sarah felt tear in her eye. Vindication. Total. I do not know what. "You do not need to say anything, Doctor. Your work speaks for itself. Now, regarding the meeting with the Secretary, we would like to arrange for you to visit the Pentagon next week. We will send transportation. But first, we have something else planned." "Something else?" "Yes, ma'am. We thought you might appreciate a more public acknowledgement of your expertise. Can you be available tomorrow afternoon, say around 2 o'clock? Yes, I suppose so. What did you have in mind?" "You will see, Doctor. Trust me, you will want to be home." For this, the call ended, leaving Sarah confused and intrigued. What kind of public acknowledgement, and why did she need to be home for it? The next day, Sarah tried to focus on normal tasks, catching up on emails, organizing her home office, preparing for her next consultation with Facility 7. But she kept checking the clock, wondering what Admiral Chen had meant. At 1:30, Her daughter came home early from work, which was unusual. "Mom, you need to see this." Her daughter was staring at her phone, eyes wide. "It is all over social media. The Navy is coming to our house." "What? What are you talking about?" Her daughter showed her the phone. Multiple posts from neighbors, local news alerts, videos of military vehicles in their quiet suburban neighborhood. "Mom, there are helicopters?" Sarah went to the window and felt her breath catch. In the distance, she could hear the distinctive sound of rotor blades, growing louder by the second. She stepped outside onto her front lawn, her daughter following, and watched as two Navy helicopters appeared over the tree line, flying low and purposeful. The sound was overwhelming, a physical force that made the ground vibrate, and the air itself seemed to shake. Neighbors were emerging from their houses, phones out, filming as the helicopters circled once, twice, then began to descend. They landed in the large park at the end of Sarah's street. Rotor wash, sending leaves and debris flying in all directions. Sarah stood frozen, watching, as the helicopter doors opened and military personnel emerged. Not just any personnel, she could see the insignia, could recognize the uniforms, high-ranking officers, medical corps, and leading them, a woman in Navy dress uniform with enough ribbons and medals to indicate serious authority. Admiral Chen. The group walked up the street towards Sarah's house, and Sarah realized with a start that cameras were following them. News crews, apparently alerted in advance, were capturing every moment. Neighbors were out in force now, watching with a mixture of confusion and excitement as a military delegation approached the home of the woman who had been fired from the local hospital just weeks ago. Admiral Chen stopped at the end of Sarah's driveway and saluted smartly. "Dr. Sarah Winters?" Sarah, standing in her jeans and sweatshirt, feeling completely unprepared for whatever was happening, managed to find her voice. "Yes, ma'am. Dr. Winters, on behalf of the United States Navy and the Department of Defense, I am here to formally recognize your exceptional service to this nation. Your expertise and courage in the face of a classified crisis saved American lives and prevented a potential catastrophe. The Secretary of Defense has authorized me to present you with the Defense Distinguished Civilian Service Award, the highest honor we can bestow upon a civilian." Sarah felt her knees go weak. The Defense Distinguished Civilian Service Award. She had heard of it. Knew it was reserved for extraordinary circumstances. Knew it meant her work had been recognized at the very highest levels of government. Admiral Chen stepped forward, holding a medal case. "Additionally, I have been instructed to inform you that your former employer, Riverside Medical Complex, has been placed under federal investigation for multiple violations, including retaliation against a whistleblower, systematic narcotic diversion, and fraud. Several members of their administration have been arrested. Your termination has been ruled unlawful, and you have been offered full reinstatement with back pay and a formal apology." The cameras were rolling, capturing Sarah's shocked expression, her daughter's proud tears, the military delegation standing at attention on a quiet suburban street. Admiral Chen continued, her voice carrying across the lawn. "Dr. Winters, you were punished for doing the right thing. You were dismissed for protecting patients and exposing corruption. But the United States military does not forget those who serve with honor and integrity, regardless of whether they wear a uniform. We need experts like you, people who will stand up for what is right even when it costs them everything. That is why we are here today. That is why we sent helicopters and a formal delegation. Because we want everyone to know that your expertise matters, your courage matters, and your service to this nation is deeply appreciated." Sarah could barely see through her tears. "Thank you, Admiral. Thank you." Admiral Chen opened the medal case and stepped forward to place the ribbon around Sarah's neck. The medal settled against her chest, heavy and real, and representing everything she had fought for. Then Admiral Chen saluted again, and Sarah, not knowing what else to do, saluted back. The military delegation applauded, and Sarah's neighbors joined in, the sound growing until the entire street was filled with the noise of recognition and celebration. Sarah stood on her lawn, medal around her neck, helicopters waiting in the park, cameras broadcasting this moment to the world, and felt something inside her finally heal. She had been locked out. She had been left standing in the cold. She had been dismissed and humiliated and made to feel worthless. But she had been wrong about one thing. She had thought no one was watching, thought no one cared about her expertise or her integrity, but someone had been watching. The people who really mattered had been paying attention. And when the crisis came, when they needed someone who could think outside the box and take risks and do whatever was necessary to save lives, they had known exactly who to call. Admiral Chen stepped closer, speaking quietly enough that only Sarah could hear. "Dr. Winters, what happened to you at Riverside was wrong. But I want you to know something. We have been tracking your career for years. Your research, your clinical outcomes, your reputation for integrity. When we needed someone for Facility 7, you were not a last resort. You were our first choice. We just needed an excuse to bring you into the military medical system." Sarah stared at her. "You mean all of this was planned?" "Not the termination, obviously. But once it happened, once we saw an opportunity to recruit you away from the civilian sector, we took it. The crisis at Facility 7 was real, and you absolutely saved lives. But Dr. Winters, you should know that we would have found a way to bring you into our system eventually. You are exactly the kind of expert we need." Sarah did not know whether to laugh or cry. "So I was being watched all along. By the right people, yes. The people who value competence over politics, who care about results over institutional self-protection. Welcome to the military medical system, Dr. Winters. I think you are going to fit in very well." The next few hours were a blur of interviews and photographs, of neighbors congratulating her and her daughter beaming with pride, of phone calls from colleagues she had not heard from in years suddenly wanting to reconnect. The news coverage was extensive, a feel-good story about a whistleblower vindicated, about military helicopters descending on a quiet neighborhood to honor a civilian expert, about justice served and expertise recognized. But for Sarah, the most meaningful moment came later that evening, after the helicopters had departed and the cameras had packed up, and the neighbors had returned to their homes. She sat in her living room with her daughter, the medal still around her neck, and finally let herself process everything that had happened. "Mom," her daughter said quietly, "I am so proud of you. I did not do anything special," Sarah said, though even as she spoke the words she knew they were not quite true. "I just did my job." "You did more than your job. You stood up for what was right when it would have been easier to stay quiet. You trusted your expertise when everyone else was telling you that you were wrong. You kept going even after they fired you." "Mom, that is not nothing. That is everything." Sarah thought about the past month, about standing in that parking lot in the cold, about the box of belongings and the cracked succulent pot, about the despair and the uncertainty and the fear that she would never work in medicine again. She thought about the phone call from Commander Mitchell, about Facility 7 and the dying patients, about the risk she had taken with an unconventional treatment approach. She thought about Admiral Chen's words, about being watched by the right people, about being valued for her competence and her integrity. She thought about how sometimes the worst moments of your life are actually the universe clearing the path for something better, something more important, something you could never have found if you had stayed comfortable and safe. "You know what the funny thing is," Sarah said. "I spent 17 years at Riverside trying to prove myself, trying to earn respect, trying to make them see my value. And they never did. But the military, people I had never met, people who had no obligation to care about me at all, they saw it immediately. They knew exactly what I could do, and they trusted me to do it. That is because they were looking for competence, not compliance," her daughter said. "Riverside wanted someone who would go along with the system. The military wanted someone who could solve impossible problems. You were never going to succeed at Riverside, Mom. You were always meant for something bigger." Sarah looked at the medal around her neck, felt its weight, understood what it represented. Not just recognition for her work at Facility 7, though that was certainly part of it, but recognition for every patient she had saved, every crisis she had managed, every time she had stood up for what was right, even when it cost her. Recognition for being exactly who she was: competent, courageous, unwilling to compromise when it came to patient safety. The next morning, Sarah received a call from Riverside Medical Complex. The new interim administrator, brought in after the arrests and the federal investigation, offered her reinstatement with full back pay, a promotion, and a formal apology from the board of directors. Sarah listened politely, then declined. "I appreciate the offer," she said, but I have accepted a position with the Department of Defense. I will be consulting on infectious disease protocols and crisis response at the national level. I think my expertise will be better utilized there. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, Dr. Winters, I understand. For what it is worth, what happened to you was wrong. We are working to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. I hope that is true, Sarah said. I really do. But my time at Riverside is over. I am moving forward. She hung up and looked at her daughter, who was grinning. You turned them down. Mom, you actually turned them down. I did. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. They had their chance. They chose politics over patience, convenience over competence. I do not need their validation anymore. I have something better. Over the following weeks, Sarah's story spread. The video of the military delegation and the helicopter landing went viral, shared millions of times across social media platforms. She became a symbol of vindication for whistleblowers everywhere. Proof that sometimes doing the right thing really does matter, that expertise really is valued, that courage really is rewarded. But the most satisfying part came when the Department of Justice announced the results of their investigation into Riverside Medical Complex. The supervisor who had retaliated against Sarah was convicted of obstruction of justice and fraud. The administrator who had signed off on her termination was found guilty of conspiracy and received a significant prison sentence. The hospital itself faced millions in fines and was placed under federal oversight. And Sarah? Sarah went to work for the Department of Defense, consulting on crisis response protocols, training military medical personnel, and helping to develop the next generation of infectious disease containment strategies. Her research was classified, her work was important, and her expertise was valued by people who understood exactly what she brought to the table. She was no longer locked out. She was no longer standing in the cold. She had been found by the people who mattered, recognized by those who understood true competence, validated in ways that went far beyond any civilian hospital position. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you are really capable of. Sometimes you have to be dismissed and humiliated and cast aside before you can discover your true value. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is actually the best thing, disguised as disaster. Sarah Winters had been locked out and left standing in the cold, but the helicopters had come. The right people had been watching. And now, standing in her new office at the Pentagon, with her Defense Distinguished Civilian Service Award displayed proudly on the wall, Sarah understood something fundamental about success and recognition and worth. Your value does not come from the institutions that employ you. It comes from what you know, what you can do, and your willingness to stand up for what is right, even when it costs you everything. The people who really matter will recognize that. They will find you, even when you think you are lost. They will come for you, even when you think you have been forgotten. All you have to do is be excellent at what you do, maintain your integrity no matter the cost, and trust that somewhere someone is watching who will understand your true worth. Sarah Winters had learned that lesson the hard way, but she had learned it completely, and it had changed everything. The helicopters had come, and Sarah